Cortez Masto. Senator Hagerty of Tennessee is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's been a lot of discussion among members of Congress about the role of cryptocurrencies in funding the recent attack on Israel that was carried out by Iran-backed Hamas. Policymakers that are hostile to cryptocurrency have even gone so far as to suggest that by eradicating the crypto industry, perhaps the attack would never have happened. I find that amazing to hear, but that's some of the claims. I'd like to provide some context to these claims. The Wall Street Journal recently reported that Hamas and Palestine Islamic Jihad, since 2021, have received roughly $130 million in crypto financing via offshore exchanges and platforms like Binance. It's important to note that these figures are disputed, and per independent analysis that was released just this week, could be overestimated by as much as 99%. The data analytics firm cited in this Wall Street Journal report has even disputed the estimates that were reported, stating that there is no evidence to suggest that Hamas fundraised anything close to this $130 million reported. Make no mistake, any such funding is unconscionable and should be addressed in a thoughtful, targeted way in order to choke off these terrorists. But we should do this without pushing the crypto industry overseas. In this case, we need a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. What seems to be lost in the discussion is the billions of dollars, I'm talking about billions with a B, that have been funneled to these very organizations we're concerned about, or that's their principal sponsor, Iran, with the blessing of the Biden administration. Until recently, this appeasement policy was led by Special Envoy for Iran, Rob Malley. Rob Malley, who's had his classified security clearances ripped away, who's been kicked out of the State Department, and whose team included at least one person who it's been reported is a member of the Iranian Experts Initiative, which is a foreign influence and collusion network that's run by the Iranian regime. Biden's lax sanctions enforcement on Iranian crude sales have allowed the terrorist regime's oil revenues to surge from $7.9 billion during the final year of the Trump maximum pressure campaign. I might add that the secondary sanctions I was involved in imposing in that administration worked. From $7.9 billion in the final year of the Trump administration to more than $42 billion in 2022. According to estimates, the Iranian regime has been able to amass up to $91 billion in illicit oil revenue since the Biden administration came into office. President Biden's also greenlighted a $10 billion payment from Iraq to Iran for electricity. Further, President Biden has sent UNRWA over $730 million. UNRWA nominally provides direct relief and works programs for Palestinian refugees in Gaza and the West Bank, but these funds are fungible. And UNRWA has an abhorrent track record of supporting anti-Semitic curricula that refer to Israel as the enemy and teach math. I'm not making this up. They teach math by counting martyred terrorists. I've seen the materials. At the same time, Qatar has over the past decade provided more than $2 billion in fungible economic and humanitarian aid. So my first question is a simple one, Dr. Wagman. Is tens of billions of dollars in Iranian oil revenue and sanctions relief from this administration, plus whatever direct monetary relief to Hamas-controlled Gaza that has flowed that way, is that in any way comparable to the $130 million that allegedly has flowed through, which is probably overstated from the crypto markets?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, crypto right now is not the main source of funding for Hamas, but definitely the old traditional ways in which we see that state funding is the most dominant thing that is funneling into the Gaza Strip from cash.
Let me follow up on that. Is it fair to say then that these oil revenues, the sanctions relief, and the direct monetary relief revenue streams have done far more than any crypto financing to either directly support these terror groups or to build up the resources that they could then divert to other malign activities?
Generally speaking, the funding of Hamas comes from state funding in many different channels. It goes through Turkey, to money exchanges, through trade-based terrorism financing, cash that is being sent, banking system, underground banking, many variety of ways. Yep. Crypto is only one of them, and it's right now it's a limited part.
Point being that we brought those revenues down dramatically through the maximum pressure campaign. They've skyrocketed because of non-enforcement of sanctions. And what seems to be happening here is that we're trying to divert attention from that fact, attacking an industry that we should be moving onshore. We want to actually have control and promote it and be able to deal with it. Instead, pushing it offshore strikes me as a very bad idea. Dr. Wagman, one last question. Do you agree that international entities are harder to work with to combat these illicit flows? Would providing clarity to the crypto industry and encouraging these companies to move to the United States and within our jurisdiction rather than forcing them offshore not be a more straightforward way to reduce these illicit flows?
Sorry, I think that having a global regime is extremely important in order to make sure that there are no weakest link, because you could impose whatever you want internally, but then everything is being pushed away to other jurisdictions. So you have to have it both internally and internationally. And with that respect, we do see that the weakest link is in other countries that did not enforce FATF regulation. And I do think that the US can push very strongly the FATF in asking it to actually publish gray list of countries and jurisdictions that do not enforce the regulation and that do not impose the travel rule and all the other regulation, which can actually create a safer global environment. In addition, the US could also choose and go and sanction or designate particular exchange platforms that are being used, in fact, for terrorism and criminals as like mixers, because they do not fully support or fully conduct the KYC that is required.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.